On February 14, 2009, security cameras at the Riverside Children's Museum in Macon, Georgia captured something that would force the building to close permanently within 6 weeks. Camera 3, positioned above the vintage toy exhibit, recorded a porcelain doll turning its head 70 degrees between the hours of 2:47 and 2:51 a.m. 4 minutes. 70 degrees. No earthquake activity. No human presence in the building. The footage was reviewed by 3 separate security firms. None could explain it. But that doll, catalogued as item 1847B, a French bisque from 1889, had been donated by the estate of Margaret Holloway, who died alone in her home, found 3 weeks after her death, clutching a photograph of that very same doll. What you're about to hear are 7 documented cases, 7 instances where the impossible became undeniable, where dolls moved, watched, and waited in the darkness. Janet Morrison kept the doll on her dresser for 9 years without incident. 9 years of silence. She'd inherited it from her grandmother in Columbus, Ohio, a cloth-bodied antique with painted porcelain features and eyes that seemed perpetually fixed on something just over your shoulder. The doll wore a cream-colored dress with delicate lace trim, stained brown in places that Janet preferred not to think about. She called it Emma, because there was a name stitched into the hem of its dress in faded red thread. On the night of October 3, 2015, Janet woke to the sound of fabric dragging across wood. A soft, rhythmic scraping. She lived alone. The sound came from her dresser. In the darkness, she could see the doll's silhouette, but something was wrong with its position. It had been facing the mirror. Now it faced her bed. Janet convinced herself she was mistaken about its original position. She closed her eyes. The dragging sound continued. Soft. Deliberate. Closer. When she opened her eyes and turned on the lamp, the doll sat on her nightstand, 18 inches from her face. She hadn't put it there. The next morning, she found tiny fabric marks on her bedsheet, a trail leading from the dresser to the nightstand. Small impressions. As if something had crawled. Janet donated the doll that afternoon to a thrift store on Brighton Avenue. The store called her 6 hours later. The doll was back on her doorstep, propped against her apartment door. She hadn't given them her address. In 2012, the Westfield Preparatory Academy in Maine converted an old storage room into additional office space. During renovation, workers found 17 dolls sealed inside the walls, wrapped individually in newspaper dated 1954. Each doll was identical. Composition material: blonde mohair, blue glass eyes. The construction foreman, David Tang, documented each doll with photographs before disposal. But maintenance worker Russell Hayes kept one, took it home for his daughter. She refused to touch it. Said its chest moved like it was breathing. Russell laughed. His daughter didn't sleep in her room for 3 days. On the 4th night, Russell decided to prove her wrong. He set up a camera focused on the doll, placed on a shelf in her bedroom. He recorded for 6 hours. At 1:22 a.m., the doll's chest rose. Fell. Rose again. A steady rhythm. Breathing. Russell watched the footage 11 times. There was no explanation. No air current could create that pattern. He examined the doll. Solid composition. No mechanical parts. Nothing hollow. The breathing stopped when he held it, resumed when he set it down. Always between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m. He returned it to the school, demanded they dispose of it properly. The headmaster informed him all 17 dolls had already been incinerated. Russell still had his in a box in his garage. If 17 had been found, and 17 destroyed, then what was he holding? The school's records were checked. 18 newspaper bundles had been photographed during the discovery. Someone had miscounted. Or something had been added after the photograph was taken. Thomas Waverly collected antique dolls for 42 years, amassing over 300 specimens in his Connecticut estate. Bisque, composition, wax, china. He catalogued each acquisition meticulously. Provenance. Condition. History. On March 8, 2018, his housekeeper Maria Gonzalez arrived to find every doll in his collection facing the same direction. East. Toward his bedroom. 300 dolls, repositioned overnight. Thomas lay in his bed, eyes open, face frozen in an expression Maria would later describe to police as recognition. The medical examiner ruled heart failure. Natural causes. But Maria insisted on one detail the report omitted. Thomas's hands were positioned strangely, palms up, fingers curled, as though he'd been reaching for something. And on his chest sat a doll that wasn't part of his collection. Small, crude, made from twisted fabric and hair. Human hair, the lab confirmed. Dark strands woven into the scalp. Thomas's hair. Gray, thin, identical in every microscopic detail. The doll wore a small tag tied around its neck with black thread. The tag bore a date. March 8, 2018. The day of his death. But the handwriting was Thomas's own, matched perfectly to his catalog entries. He'd made the doll. Tagged it. Placed it on his own chest. The collection was auctioned 4 months later. The small fabric doll was not included in the sale. It had vanished from the evidence locker at the medical examiner's office. The security footage from that night showed nothing. But the examiner's assistant quit the next day, refused to explain why, moved to Oregon and disconnected her phone. When Sarah Chen purchased a pair of matching porcelain dolls at an estate sale in Portland, Oregon, she thought they'd be perfect for her antique booth. Identical faces, delicate features, Victorian-era clothing. The seller, an elderly man named Howard, offered them for $12. Sarah tried to negotiate up, certain they were worth far more. Howard insisted. $12. Just take them. She asked about their history. Howard's expression darkened. He said they'd belonged to twin sisters, Evelyn and Eleanor Marsh, who died in 1923 during a house fire. The dolls were the only items recovered intact. Sarah placed them in her booth, positioned side by side. The next morning, they faced each other. She repositioned them. The following day, they faced each other again. She mentioned it to her business partner, Marcus, who suggested vibrations from foot traffic. Sarah agreed, though the dolls were heavy, stable. On the 6th day, she arrived to find both dolls facing the front window. That afternoon, identical twin girls, no older than 7, pressed their faces against the glass, staring at the dolls. Sarah waved. The girls didn't respond. Didn't blink. Just stared. For 11 minutes by the store camera timestamp. Then they walked away in perfect synchronization. Sarah checked the doll bases that evening. Underneath each, carved into the porcelain, were initials. E.M. and E.M. Evelyn and Eleanor Marsh. And below the initials, a phrase in tiny letters, still burning. Sarah researched the fire. The twins had been trapped in their nursery. The door had been locked from the outside. Their father was convicted of murder but maintained they'd locked it themselves, said they wanted to stay together forever. Dr. Elizabeth Harding, a psychologist in Chicago, used dolls in her practice for child therapy. In 2016, she acquired a vintage composition doll from a colleague, an unremarkable piece with a cloth body and painted features. She used it in sessions for 8 months without incident. Then a 7-year-old patient named Michael began speaking to the doll. Normal behavior. But Michael relayed specific information the doll allegedly told him. Information he couldn't possibly know. The doll's original owner was named Charlotte. She lived on Ashland Avenue in 1949. She died when she was 7. Hit by a streetcar. Michael described the accident with disturbing precision. The wet pavement. The blue dress she wore. The sound it made. Dr. Harding was skeptical until Michael mentioned Charlotte's last words. She'd asked for her mother. Called her by name. Vivian. Dr. Harding researched. Charlotte Russo. 7 years old. Died June 12, 1949. Struck by a streetcar on Ashland Avenue. Her mother's name was Vivian. The doll had been catalogued as part of the Russo estate sale in 1950. Dr. Harding stopped using it in sessions. But Michael's mother called 3 weeks later, frantic. Michael had been drawing pictures of a little girl. Always the same girl. Always wearing a blue dress. Always holding the doll. And in every picture, the girl stood at the foot of Michael's bed. His mother asked if Dr. Harding still had the doll. She did. Locked in her office cabinet. When Dr. Harding checked, the cabinet door was open. The doll sat on her desk chair, positioned as if watching the door. Waiting. Michael's drawing stopped the day Dr. Harding burned the doll. But she still receives letters, postmarked from Chicago, no return address. Inside each envelope, a child's drawing. A girl in a blue dress. And every drawing shows the girl getting closer to Dr. Harding's home. 7 dolls. 7 instances where reality fractured and something impossible emerged. But these are only the cases where someone survived to tell the story, where evidence remained, where witnesses came forward. The question isn't whether these dolls moved. The footage exists. The testimonies are documented. The question is what they're waiting for. What they want. And why, in every single case, the phenomena intensified after the doll was removed from its original location. As if distance makes them angry. As if separation demands a response. There's an 8th case. More recent. More disturbing. Security footage from a storage facility in Vermont. 3 weeks ago. But that story requires something I haven't yet decided to share. Something that might be better left locked away. At least for now.